Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. It is Wednesday, November 3rd, and I wanted to have the opportunity to speak with you briefly today in the aftermath of having completed our election cycle yesterday. I'm very gratified to the people of Westchester County that have seen fit to give me the opportunity to serve for the next 4 years as your county executive. It's a great honor. I've been very appreciative of the opportunity for these 4 years that are almost come to an end. I have another 2 months left to go in this term, and I'm equally appreciative of the opportunity to continue to serve for what will be a final 4 years in this position. As you may know, I authored a bill which was passed by the Board of Legislators and I signed into law that limits all county executives to 2 terms, a maximum of 2 terms, a hard 2-term limit. There's no returning after the end of those 8 years. It applies to myself and all of my successors, and so it will apply to me now that I have had the good pleasure of having a re-election bid. So I look forward for these 4 years that are ahead. I look forward for a substantive period of time, and then I look forward to turning over the car keys to whomever it is that will be my successor at whatever point in time that may happen. I wanted to just take a moment or two, again, to thank the voters for their vote of confidence. It was a significant vote of confidence. Campaigns are ordeals. Both myself and my opponent went through the ordeal of these months, and we put ourselves before the voters. I've done that a number of times in the past, so I'm familiar with what's involved in it. I'm grateful that it's come to an end, but I'm also grateful for the endorsement. And I also want to express a measure of thanks to all of those individuals that work within my executive team, within my executive family, who've all been part of this effort over these 4 years. I would certainly argue that the things that we did over these 4 years represented results, and those tangible results are the most important level of political action that there can be. But to all of those individuals, to Ken Jenkins, the Deputy County Executive, Joan McDonald, Director of Operations, Emily Saltzman, the Deputy Director of Operations, Andrew Ferris, Chief of Staff, Catherine Chaffee, who is Director of Communications, John Nona, the County Attorney, Bridget Gibbons, the Director of Economic Programs and Services, and so many other people. Steve Bass, head of our Intergovernmental Affairs Group, along with Ellen Hendricks, the Assistant Director. All those individuals have been critical in us doing the job that we have before us and that we will continue to do, hopefully, for the next 4 years. I wanted to just review some of the past 4 years and how it ties into the future, because really it's always about the future. It's always about what we intend to do going forward. What I first want to acknowledge is the dominance of the COVID issue, the COVID pandemic in our actions every day. Since March of 2020, so much of what we've done is had to focus around COVID, and we've had the ups and downs of the rise in infections and the decrease in infections. As we're speaking today, in the first week of November of 2021, infections are again on a downslope. We're in the vicinity of about 1,000 active cases in Westchester County. That is down from prior peaks, the summertime peak of 2,800 this year, and the prior peaks were much more profound before we had vaccinations available to us. The strategy that we've taken on COVID that has led us up to this point is the strategy that we will look at going forward. Where we are today, 91% of all adults 18 years of age and older in Westchester County have been vaccinated with at least 1 vaccine dose. That roughly equates to about 750,000 individuals. Most of those individuals, 640,000 of those individuals, have had both doses if it's a 2-dose situation, and the remaining 75,000 will receive their second dose over the course of the next number of weeks so that the county will be fully vaccinated at that 91 percentile level. We have done all of this by making vaccinations more easily accessible, by making sure that testing was easily accessible and free, and also preparing masks, other PPE items, hand sanitizers for distribution through organizations, institutions, school districts, and so forth. And the more easily that you have access to a mask, you wear it, you protect yourself from passing the virus on to other people, the less virus infections that we have. Where we are today is not at the end of the trail. We hope that we're heading in that direction, but we are entering now the cooler weather, as we can experience outside today, and then also the holiday season, which may give us more community contact points at Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays, New Year's, and so forth. So we're going to watch where we go in the future. But as we look to the future, we're hoping to make vaccines easily available for the fact that now all of those 750 people would now be eligible for a booster shot, since booster shots have been authorized not only for Pfizer, which has previously been in effect, but both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson as well. And then also the vaccination process for those under the age of 12, those kids that are not part of our overall vaccination rate or vaccination base. And we will be working with local school districts to make those vaccinations easily available for those that choose to take it. We have not moved in the direction of a mandate on any of these things. We have seen that when we make things easily available and we have a public dialogue that identifies what the value of the vaccinations are, the vast majority of Westchester residents respond to that. They do it voluntarily, but they also do it with the urgency of trying to protect themselves from the spread of the virus. So we're going to continue that path. We obviously reserve the right to do anything that a crisis might require, but we've been able to stay away from the crisis stage, and it's on that basis that we look at different strategies. And if we don't need to take more severe strategies, we won't take more severe strategies. We're not in the business of mandates. We're in the business of trying to fight COVID. And so I think that is a rational approach. It has worked here in Westchester County, and we think it'll continue to work. And certainly COVID is the number one issue on our agenda for the next 4 years. Also on our agenda is the stabilization of Westchester County's finances. This has been a debatable point over the last few years, but when we walked in the door, we inherited certain negatives that we had to correct and fix. We inherited some union contracts that were not negotiated nor were funded in the budget, and these were contracts that were open-ended in the case of CSEA for 7 years. There was a tremendous amount of money to close the contract, even when we negotiated years of zero as part of the contract. We found that contracts that had been signed and approved were not fully funded in that first budget. Revenue streams were predicated on an action to privatize the airport, which was rejected by the Board of Legislators. All of those things we had to deal with in the first year. But after that first year, where we did stabilize our finances, we had a tax cap compliant 2% property tax increase in the first year. We have now subsequently cut property taxes in the subsequent 2 budget years. And now, as we prepare to present to the Board of Legislators a budget for the year 2020, we intend to cut county property taxes for a 3rd consecutive year. We have not had 3 years of consecutive property tax cuts in 20 years. The last 3 years that it was done was literally in 1999, 2000, and 2001 budgets. That's exactly the 20-year cycle by which we now are doing the same thing. How long we are able to do that will depend on how well we can continue to find sources of non-property tax revenue and how successful we are in trying to control the expenses of the county. But we are dealing in a county government for which 65% or so of the expenses are mandated by state and federal government. That's not new with me. All my predecessor county executives have made the same point time and time again. So it is not just blithe spending. It is required responsibilities that we're tasked with doing. We're tasked with having a county jail. We're tasked with having a probation department. We're tasked with having a public health department. We're tasked with delivery of the Department of Social Services programs that help the indigent. These are things that the state of New York requires the county to do, and they require us to tax to do those services and functions with some reimbursements along the line. So as we approach these things in as intelligent a way as we can, we believe that what we've been able to do the last 2 years and now in the upcoming budget, which will go before the Board of Legislators for their discussion and approval and modification, is to do the things we need to do, maintain our services, but not raise property taxes in the process of doing it. And there's a lot of rhetoric out there, but the truth of the matter is found not in my words or somebody else's words. Look at the county budget itself. The past budgets are online. The upcoming budget will be placed online when we deliver it. You could look at it for yourself. It's a complicated document. You have to hack through a lot of stuff to get to what you're looking for. But the proof, the facts, are right there in the county budget. And the stabilization of our county budget is one of the most important priorities we have. Absent COVID, it would be the most important situation. But in fighting the pandemic, the fastest way to full economic recovery is by having the pandemic recede to the point of not being a crisis for us to face. And so we're hopeful that that will happen. The judgment of where we were fiscally was made not subjectively by me, but it was made by a state controller audit that found deficiencies in the year that ended in 2017 that we had to correct. It was found in the bond rating agencies, which downgraded Westchester County's bonds from the prior AAA to AA plus and put on a negative outlook. It was also defined by the state controller's statewide assessment of fiscal stress of each of the different local governments. They do that report annually. And in the last year, we have just risen from the negative outlook to a stable outlook in our bond rating. That is a plus. That's restoring our bond rating. And we've seen ourselves move from a high-risk area to a moderate risk area in stress from the state controller. So those are positive signs of fiscal stability. The fact that we have more money in our reserve funds, which is like your savings account at home. If you know that something could happen, if you own a home and your furnace might break, you need to have money available in your savings account to cover that. Or if you have a breakdown in your car that's not covered by warranty, you have to have money in your savings account. The reserve fund for Westchester County is that savings account, and the larger that it is, it prepares us for crises, the rainy day fund, as people would call it. And that's not hoarding money, that's making sure that we have sufficient money available to meet the needs that might arise. And when the Wall Street rating agencies see that we've set aside sufficient money to cover those expenses, then they are happy to give us an upgrade, which means when we go to the bond market, particularly for capital projects that are necessary, we can borrow money at less interest rate. If you've ever borrowed money to make a home improvement, you know that your credit rating determines what kind of interest rates that they will have within certain parameters and how good a credit risk you are. The same applies to the county in its bond rating, and we've stabilized that as part of stabilizing our finances. As we look ahead, we will be under this pressure every year for the rest of eternity. The 2022 budget that we present will involve a balanced budget, and it will involve a significant county property tax levy cut. What happens the year after that and the year after that is subject to how well we manage our operations. We are looking, when we do new contracts with major entities, to negotiate them in ways that are favorable to the county. We did that with the Liberty Lines bus contract, where $20 million was saved over a 5-year period of time. We did that with the Wheelabrator contract, $17 million saved over 10 years. And we did that with the negotiations that followed the battle that we had over Playland Amusement Park. The final arrangements that were negotiated by our county attorney's department were sufficiently successful for the taxpayer that it offset any cost of litigation, and it also provided Westchester County taxpayers a better arrangement for the deal that occurred. Whether I personally preferred that we have done the deal, I walked in the door and the deal was in place. The battle we had was over whether or not the parties were living up to the arrangement that was adjudicated in court. We came to a settlement that we agreed to, and that settlement is to the benefit of Westchester County taxpayers because it returns more money to the county than the original deal did, and that is also part of stabilizing our finances. In Westchester County over the last 4 years, crime is down. Serious crime is down. Index crime is down. Now, Westchester is comprised of a lot of different components. We have an urban component where the crime numbers are higher than they are in the more rural or suburban components. There is some crime of some level in every community, but we found that despite the national narrative about crime is up, or crime is up in this particular urban environment or another urban environment, overall in Westchester County, violent crimes are down over the last 4 years. We hope to maintain that trend as we go forward. And the way we do that is in great part how we work with our public safety department, the county police. County police has two major functions. They police the parkways of Westchester County, and that would be the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Cross County Parkway, Sawmill, Bronx River, Taconic Parkways. And we also police the major county assets, the parks, recreation facilities, the sewer treatment plants, the county office buildings. We do not provide local street policing except where we do so on contract, for which we have a major contract in Mount Kisco, and we have a contract as well in the town of Cortland. In those areas, we do provide that basic policing at some level of agreed upon negotiation between the town, village, and the county government. But our county government police department is involved in multiple multi-jurisdictional efforts. We're involved with local governments, with state police in breaking robbery rings, in breaking those entities that are involved in car theft or moving drugs across dotted line borders. And so the county police and some of their specialized unit do a particularly good job of that, and we're appreciative of that, and their skill and ability to do those things we stand behind. The argument over quote-unquote defund the police does not exist in Westchester County. We have fully funded our police department, and fully funding the police department and still working to implement reforms to the police department are not mutually exclusive. It's a false choice to tell people that you reform the things that you want to reform in the police system, and the way to do that is to defund the police. It becomes part of a political rhetoric, not part of a practical implementation. We are committed to a robust county police presence that will be a positive in its interaction in the community. And as an example of it, we did a police reform report that came back with 52 recommendations, 7 of which were statewide issues, the remaining 45 which we could implement at the local level. We've implemented about 30 of those 45, and we've done every one of those items in cooperation with the county police department, not just the management, but with the rank and file members of the county police department. So that is a good sign of cooperation, which is a theme of what we've done in our first term and what we expect to be the case in our second term. It's very important to understand that some of these changes are happening cooperatively, not at counterpoint. And the biggest one that we announced as part of the budget, and you'll see it in detail when you see the budget in full detail, is the establishment of mental health resource teams that are able to go out in a number of nodes around the county and alongside police response can deal with an incident that may involve a person who's having a mental health issue, so that if the proper response is a mental health related moment, that we'll have personnel there who are trained to do that. And obviously they go in concert with the police who are able to handle those incidents where violence might occur. But that was one of the major, probably one of the top 3 recommendations made by our police reform group, and that one is being implemented. There are other recommendations that are still in the works. We're still discussing and debating between the legislature over legislation that might occur, and we're also working with the police groups over issues that they have less comfort with. But we're working in the right direction, trying to accomplish these things. And we're doing it without fanfare, and we're doing it without rhetoric. So when I hear people that say things like, government is too big, and there's defund the police and all these things, I know that's political rhetoric. I've been involved in politics a long time. I understand what I'm hearing when I hear those things. You should understand that in the second term that I will serve in, we will implement intelligent reform. We will do it to the greatest extent possible with the cooperation of the police, and we will do it in a way that provides the benefit to the community of both what policing does to protect them against crime and also what policing can do to make that connection between police and community that has to happen if we're going to have a good, positive relationship. So some of that is a second-term initiative. Our issues that relate to housing are very important to us. The housing costs in Westchester County have been booming. House values have been on the rise. People who make the decision to move are finding that their houses are worth much more selling them than they were when they originally purchased them any number of years ago, whether it was a long period of time or a recent period of time. The intrinsic value of your house may be the single greatest asset that you as an individual have. And so seeing the increase in housing values is a statement that there is a value in the minds of people who want to move into Westchester County that is reflected in their willingness to pay your selling price for that house. We had conversations with the Hudson Gateway Realtors organization, and we're here for part of a press conference. They highlighted those things, and that underlies the argument that everybody's leaving Westchester and nobody wants to come to Westchester. Well, the second half of that is not true. People leave for a variety of reasons, and when they choose to leave, they leave. But the asset that they have is highly marketable to people that want to come into Westchester, young couples who live in Manhattan or Brooklyn, and they want to come out to the suburbs to raise their families, people transferring in for corporate jobs that are based anywhere in the metropolitan area, and they want a home in a stable suburb, beautiful settings, safe streets, good schools, access to water, access to commuter rail. All of those things go into the value of a home. Now, what we do have to focus on, we have in this term, and we expect to do more of it, is the need for affordable housing, because not everybody who has an important job is being compensated at the level of those in the society that have the highest level of compensation. If you are a successful money manager, hedge fund manager, financier, Wall Street person, if you are a senior lawyer with a law firm, if you're a top-level advertising executive in the fashion industry, in the publishing industry, your compensation is commensurate with those skills, and that certainly puts you in the business of being able to buy any type of home in Westchester County. But for those people who work in different fields, they may be nurses, they may be teachers, they may be firefighters, they may be cab drivers, whatever they are, they're doing their job every day is important to the economy of the county, but their level of compensation doesn't equal what happens if you work on Wall Street or in a major law firm. So the ability to identify and develop units of affordable housing for families and for seniors is very much part of our mix. And once again, if it wasn't for COVID sort of being an overarching issue that we all have to deal with every day, affordable housing might very well be right after finances as the next most important issue. We've made strides in affordable housing. We've probably delivered or en route to delivering over 2,000 units of affordable housing. We cut the ribbon on a project in Westchester earlier this year for 34 units, 75 units, Mayfair Apartments in Greenberg, Dayspring Commons down in Yonkers. We didn't build or develop these projects, but we put county assets into these projects to help make them happen. And when they go online and they provide affordability, then that is affordability against a need that is municipal and countywide. And we're trying very hard to see that every community does their own affordable housing to satisfy a need, and then also to be available for the larger regional need. It can be a controversial issue, but in the aggregate, we have to have more affordable housing if we want to have a balanced society and structure so that people who work here can also live here if they choose to, and they don't have to live 50, 60, 70 miles away and try to commute every day. And in an emergency setting, that would be untenable. So our second term is going to prioritize affordable housing, and we're going to focus on this project by project. How do we help finance through new homes acquisition funds or by infrastructure funds or IDA incentivization? How do we help promote those types of affordable housing units to come online? We think we can do that. And we think we can get closer to the ultimate goal that our study from 2 years ago showed, where we need 11,000 new units. I don't know that we'll hit that number during the course of a second term, but we're going to strive to hit that number, and we look forward to the cooperation of the municipalities in order to do it. We have many capital projects that we've completed over the last 4 years. I've gone through a litany of some so many times. You know, you probably could give the checklist that I mentioned. The Sprain Ridge pools that were empty when we came into office. A tree was growing out of one of those pools. We put those pools back online for the recreational purpose that they were intending, little kids being able to swim in the summertime. We've completely renovated the Miller House in North Castle, a historic site where George Washington was at during the Battle of White Plains, and it's been renovated, and it stands now without a blue tarp over it against the weather, something that is a symbol of our American tradition, our American values, that we preserve something from the past, something that bespeaks of the Revolutionary War, which was fought at some level in some of our hamlets and our street corners. And we've also tackled the North County Trailway and made major improvements on that. We delivered on the promise to make sure that we had a New Rochelle family court facility. And the one that we have now on Garden Street is infinitely better than the prior one we have. All of these were difficult issues, but we worked through them, we got them done, and now the people who use that family court in New Rochelle and Mount Vernon and Pelham and related areas now have a proper facility to operate with. All of those capital projects are just the cutting edge. We've announced over the course of the year that in our capital budget, we have budgeted money to do the next round of capital projects, things such as the Tarrytown Sleepy Hollow Lighthouse improvements, the Whiteman Mansion in Yonkers and the Loire Preserve, the money that we have set aside to finish off, which is underway now, the South County Trailway, which goes through Hastings and Yonkers and so forth, so that we can reach a point where that asset is protected and goes forward. What we do with the Mearstead property in Bedford and how that hopefully will be stabilized and brought forward. And of course, Playland. Even though there's a management arrangement that will kick in on December 1st, we still have obligations to provide capital. We have committed to more capital at Playland than any recent past year administration. And I personally believe, that with the right management and the right marketing, that Playland can be a viable facility again. I do not believe the write-off comments that people make, the county can't manage it and our government can't manage it. A government that's not committed to managing an asset won't manage it. A government that's committed and understands how to do that in a business context can manage it. And as I've often said many times, people look at my resume, they'll see the positions in public office that I've held, and they'll make the offhanded line about what my career was. My career spent 20 years involved in corporate life, and I understand, because I've seen it and I've been part of it, teams of people that knew how to manage facilities and develop them and structure them properly. And I believe that the parks that we have in this county can improve and can continue to provide a tremendous service. And that's why we've invested in them, and we will continue to do so in a second term. I want to highlight the nature of our relationships with other levels of government is critical. We cannot survive as an island. We have to have working cooperative relationships with the municipal governments, the cities, towns, and villages of Westchester County. We have to have cooperative relationships with the school districts, which do not report to us and which we do not control, but we have been a partner all the way through this COVID crisis, whether it was high-risk sports or providing testing or providing vaccination for teachers. All of those things require us to have a good working relationship with local governments. We can't take the attitude, we're here and you're there, and that's not our problem. Sometimes the state takes that attitude or the federal government takes that attitude. We don't have the luxury of that, not in my opinion. And I've served in the county legislature, I've served in municipal government, I've served in the state legislature. I understand the interplay of those entities and how we as a county government have to work to try to bring those things together. And it's not easy because there are different interests that are involved. But we can work through those difficulties and we can accomplish things. And we're going to continue in the second term our weekly calls during the school season with school superintendents. We're on the phone every Monday morning at 8:30 for a half an hour, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, going over the issues that involve the way the schools have to function under COVID and what the county can do to be helpful to them. And those have been essential calls in being able to work through thorny problems and get to solutions rather than, rhetoric. We also have twice a month municipal calls where the city, town, and village officials, the board of legislators, members of the state legislative delegation, and the congressional delegation are invited to go through a series of issues. We'll present a number of different policy issues, and then we invite commentary from the group. And all of that, too, is helpful to create that bond, that connective between all of us. When you look at the different levels of government, there's very little duplication of services that goes on. People think there's duplication, but if you go into the actual budgets of each of these different governments, where one line ends, another line begins, you can argue that a regional use of certain things might be more cost efficient, and we certainly are happy to take that role on as a county government, but it depends on what the service is and how the people in that community want it. Because if what you want is home rule, if you want people to determine the destiny that they have, then you won't impose those regional structures on them. It will come up organically from within the groups themselves, and we're prepared to work with people on that. We just finished getting the census out, which shows that we have over 1 million people in Westchester County. First time in our history we showed that population base. And let's not kid ourselves. There have been 1 million people in this county long before it came up on the report. But the county never took the decennial, every 10 years census seriously. We took it seriously in 2020. We put in motion actions. We got grant money from the state. We worked with local communities that had the same passion. And we were able to have a very solid census effort out there, and it tracked people in places that were hard to track before. And when all was said and done, we hit the 1 million mark. And that opens the door for various grants and aid that we can now compete for because we've passed that threshold of having 1 million people in the county. And when we had them here all along, we certainly didn't get the benefit of going after that aid and grant money. We have a major challenge in the next 4 years, and that is to discuss and come up with a plan about what we want to do with Westchester County Center. Westchester County Center is a beautiful Art Deco building. It was built at the turn of the decade between the 20s and the 30s. It is in sync with the kind of decisions that were made at Playland and made on the Bronx River Parkway. They were foresight that other jurisdictions didn't do, and the county center has served us well for over that almost 100-year period of time. In the 1980s, my predecessor, County Executive Andrew O'Rourke, undertook a major reconstruction of the county center, and it took us from where we were deteriorating in the first 60 years of its operation and to a new breath of life. And that renovation took us through the 80s and 90s, the aughts, and through the teens, and now we're here in the 20s. And we have to consider that we have to look at that challenge again, but also to determine in the current day what is the best use of that physical plan? How would it be constructed, reconfigured if necessary? And we intend to make that part of a community dialogue so that everybody has some input in on that. But we think the county center is a tremendous asset, and we want to make sure it is maximized as an asset. Just before COVID struck, we had finally completed something that I put some time and energy into, which was convincing the leadership of Section 1 basketball to agree to put their finals back in the county center. It had been there for many, many years. It had fallen out of favor for a few years. There was less interest in trying to make it happen. We came in with a commitment to that. Having grown up in a high school that was basketball was king, I knew the value of what it was, even if I couldn't play the game myself. And we were able to accomplish that mission. But then almost immediately the county center was turned into a vaccination center. First a hospital, would-be hospital, then a vaccination center. So now it's performed the life-saving mission rather than to entertain people, but to save lives. And it's performed that well. But we have to look to the future of what the county center is going to look like. That is a second-term priority. Equally important to us, Westchester County Airport. Now, we came in the door, there was a battle over whether or not it should be privatized. We stopped that. No privatization at the airport. We wanted to continue to have public decision-making made, not private sector decision-making, which might have come up with very different outputs. We also made it a point of understanding that there was groundwater pollution that threatened, did not yet poison, but threatened the drinking watershed that is adjacent to the airport to its north. Our county attorney, John Nona, and a number of our other key executives were involved in going through negotiations with the state Department of Environmental Conservation, a consent order in place, and at some significant expense to make sure we remediate any possibility of such pollutions under the chemical acronym PFAS, PFAS. It is beyond my capability to explain what the word means in its entirety. All we know is that even in a small part per the amount of water, it is a toxic substance and cannot be allowed to be in the drinking water. And we put energy into that at the county airport to protect from that. We did a repavement of the runway in this term. The repavement of the runway was not to lengthen it. It was not to strengthen it. You can't bring in heavier aircraft or larger sized aircraft any more than you could before, but the paving of it provides us with public safety. Were we not to have done that, any particular plane that came in, if a tragedy occurred, we would be completely liable for what that tragedy was. And we weren't prepared to do that. So we accomplished that single capital project during that period of time. We have to have a master plan discussion about the airport. And in that discussion, the voices of the people who live near the airport and live underneath the flight path are important. We held some public forums the very first year I was in office, and we went around to different parts, and we heard different dialogues. We had a follow-up meeting with the FAA, which we put in a fourth community for public dialogue, and that dialogue has to continue. But the dialogue cannot just be limited to some of Westchester residents. It has to be involved with all Westchester residents because the airport is a public transit asset. It is not merely just what it is as an irritant to the people who live near it or under the flight path, but it is an asset to the people who use it for their purposes and the proximity for businesses. It's part of economic development. So we're looking for a full dialogue. I haven't put my finger on the scales and said this is what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. We've said we're not going to expand the airport, but how we enhance the airport, well short of expansion, will be part of this discussion. And everybody will have a role to play in the discussion. We were prepared to start it 18 months ago. COVID really made it impossible to have these kind of public forums because you must have in-person meetings and people discussing things in person if you really want to tap the public opinion. But that is part of our second-term priorities. We look at a host of other different issues that sit before us. I've already spoken probably longer than I initially intended to. We intend to lay some of those initiatives out, pilot programs, in the budget that'll be released next week. As the Board of Legislators analyzes each of the different departments, you'll see other initiatives that we've identified as being valuable. Some other initiatives we've announced already over the course of these weeks, a program to improve black maternal health using doulas and midwives. We've also talked about our efforts to train police officers to deal with domestic violence issues, a host of large and small type initiatives that we think help advance the overall situation for Westchester County. I think the important thing in all of this to understand is that the election is not a finish line. It is not a moment of accomplishment. It's not like you win the Super Bowl and you get a trophy and you wave the trophy around and then you go off to Disney World. An election, while it does convey victory to somebody, is the beginning of the next process. I've often said publicly, most of my career, that election night is not a blank check from you to me. It is a promissory note from me to you. The things that we talk about during the campaign, if we stay on what the county government is supposed to do and we don't get lost in arguing federal immigration policy or what someone thinks is a school curriculum policy, we focus on what the county government's job is. And much of what we do may not be all that fascinating. It may not be sexy enough to be the topic of conversation at a dinner party. But what we're tasked with doing is what I ran for it to be county executive. And in that first election 4 years ago, I gave you a promissory note. Now, as we come to the end of that term, I go through that list and I say, we talked about what we would do in the Nurashoff family court. We talked about what our theories were at the airport to stop any expansion, but at the same time deal with the issues of pollution and deal with it forthrightly. You check that off the list. You go down the list of these things. And this is the satisfaction of what was in that promissory note from me to you. So now we begin a new term, a final 4-year term, with a new promissory note. And some of these things I've talked about, how we implement the mental health crisis team, how we go about a full review of the county center, how we go about the master plan at the airport, how we go about dealing with COVID and putting COVID behind us, how we continue to stabilize our finances, what we do with the tax rate. All of those are part of this new promissory note. And that promissory note came on election night, when the polls closed and the numbers are counted and someone designates a winner. That winner now says, you've given me this opportunity for 4 years. In my case, an additional 4 years. And I hope to do right by that. I grew up in this county. I've lived almost all of my life in this county, absent some years of corporate relocation. When I worked for a corporation, that moved me around the country. But when I left that corporation, I came back to Westchester and have lived the bulk of my adult life here. I care deeply about this county. And I don't care about the county government as much as I care about the county itself and the people of the county. I've said often, this is a beautiful county. We know that. We have assets that few other people have. We have a beautiful river. We have a terrific Long Island Sound. We have reservoirs that function as lakes in the north central part of the county. We have an easy commute into New York City. We have safe streets. We have terrific school districts to the greater extent. We have assets that other places would beg to have one of those assets, and we have 4 and 5 of those assets. And the greatest asset we have are the people of Westchester County, people who are talented, who are knowledgeable, who are top in their field in all different fields of endeavors. And consider the team that I am fortunate enough to have pulled together to govern this county. The concept that the person who gets elected, the leader, is the source of every good idea is craziness. I understand it's part of the ego of presidents and governors and mayors and county executives, but it's not realistic in the real world. In the real world, you need talented people in a host of different areas to perform. And just as Westchester, in the body politic at large, have the most talented financial managers and lawyers and operations and marketing people, so do we have in this government the quality of people like Joan McDonnell and John Nona and other individuals that we've been able to pull from other assignments and convince them to work in this government, and in many times at much lower levels of compensation than they received in the private sector. We also recognized when we came in 4 years ago that a significant number of leaders in this government were doing a fine job as leaders, and we kept them. We did not make it a political purge. Where we made changes, and we thought they were justified. And in many cases, when we had open positions, we promoted from within. Norma Drummond, as now Commissioner Planner, promoting from within. Tom Gleason, Commissioner Sheriff, promoted from within. Joe Spano, Director of Corrections, former, brought back in to responsibilities. Hugh Grecian in DPW Transportation, formerly with the county, 10 years in the consultant world, brought back in. And in each of these different things, we have talented people to deal with these problems. Even having talented people, these problems are difficult. There's nothing easy about them. I've lived with these problems every day and every night for 4 years. And I say that because I asked you for that responsibility, and you gave it to me 4 years ago, and I asked for it again, and you gave it to me for the second 4 years. I don't ask for it for any longer period of time. I now have the burden on me to prove to you that I'm a person of my word, that I intend to do the things that I set out to do. Some things may be beyond the scope of any individual or set of individuals to control. There are things that are going to happen that happen outside of our ability to control. We turn around and find out a federal policy involves us and we're tagged with it, but we had nothing to do with it. Or a flood comes, a hurricane and a flood comes, and now we have to respond to something that we haven't seen happen in 15, 20, 25, 30 years, but it happens under our watch. We have to deal with it. But that is what being adult is. Being an adult is different from being a child. When you're a child, you can cry, you can be upset about things, you can have a temper tantrum, and you're still in the process of gaining maturity. So parents look at children and try to treat those moments of disappointment as learning experiences so that someday that child that you're raising in your home can go out and have their own family and be stable enough to make decisions to protect their children in due time. I've had that experience as a father and now as a grandfather. But we have to be sober about these things. And we have to make sure that we understand that our governing process is about specifics. We have to read. We have to understand what the policy choices are. We just can't stand outside of the specifics and argue philosophy and argue culture wars. We can't do that. We can't do that in function. We can't do that in the town level. We can't do that in the school board level. We can't do that in the county or the state or the federal level. But in the level of government that I'm at right now, we have an open dialogue. We have an inclusive style of operation. We want diversity. We want people of talent to be part of our situation, and we'll respect the people that we deal with if we're shown equal respect. Now, I know when I do some of these speeches, there are people who come on Facebook and they make comments, and sometimes the comments are rude. Sometimes the comments are nasty. Well, it's free speech. You have a right to do that. You should consider whether your point of view, being angry about something, can be expressed properly without being uncivil. Because this country is founded on a basis of mutual destiny. And that mutual destiny means that whether we disagree or not, we are still engaged together in the fortunes of this country. And when we think that we can be rude and express our anger and vent and vilify other people, that corrodes the country, and that makes us weaker. It makes us more vulnerable to problems outside the country, and ultimately, it makes us weak for internal strife in the country. And it's been often said, if America was ever going to collapse, it would never be conquered by another country. It would die from within. We would collapse from within. We would lose that sense of civility. We'd lose that sense of common American destiny. We lost that 150 years ago plus during the Civil War. And we went through a terrible experience. 600, 700,000 Americans died. We all read about it in the history books. None of us were alive to see what the carnage meant. The boys that came home without a leg, the boys that never came home, the widows and the orphans that had to experience this terrible thing. Why would we so blithely think that violence is the way to go? Why would we think so simply we can disagree to the point of violence to each other because we disagree? We're in a county government where we're going to disagree. I'm going to offer ideas and positions, and you may not agree with them, and you may not like them, and you may want to argue for different policies. The Board of Legislators has authority. State government has authority. I don't have unanimous, unilateral authority to do whatever I want as county executive. But I have been given an opportunity. I've asked for it, and you've given it to me, and I intend to fulfill that to the best of my ability for as long as I can. I want to do what's right for Westchester because it's an oath I take, because it's who I am and what I believe in, and because I never forget where I grew up, in the southernmost part of this county, in a poor neighborhood, to parents who worked blue-collar work all their life, never made much money, figured out how to have a house, figured out how their son and daughter would actually go to college, albeit as commuters, not away, school. Commute, come home, go to work, George. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that opportunity in this wonderful county. I might have been born anywhere else on this planet, but I was born here. I was given, with the background I've just described, I was given tremendous opportunity and tremendous gifts. I want that opportunity for other people. In the time that I have in this job, I want to do everything I can to make sure that opportunity is there for you. And I appreciate you taking a few minutes to listen to this, to understand where we've been, where I hope we will go, and then we will see what fate holds in store for this wonderful county. We've been a successful county before I started. We'll be a successful county after I'm gone. But in the meantime, let us do the work that we have to do. I want to ask our friends in the communications department if we have any questions from the press. We do not. Obviously, this is a more general thematic visit. This is not an update on specifics. We will be back next Monday to provide those specifics on different issues. But again, I just wanted to say thank you very much. If you've watched this all the way through, thank you. If you just watch bits and pieces of it, thank you. It's important, I think, for us to have a dialogue, and in this particular case, for you to understand the thinking that I have the morning after. It's not celebratory. It's not a parade. It's a sense of dedication and commitment to the things that we believe in order to be self-governing. And I do believe those things, and I hope you do too. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. Have a good day, and be safe.